Good evening and welcome to the City of Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for this Wednesday, September 12th, 2018. Karen, could we have the roll call?
Okay, Arnson?
Here.
Giroso?
Here.
Hardley?
Here.
Holst?
Here.
Leeper?
Here.
Saul?
Here.
Wingert?
Here.
Note that Oberly and Atkins are absent.
Thank you very much. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion is approved. Our next item of business is any public comments. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the commission on something that, other than what is on our agenda tonight, has a comment, are welcome to come forward. Seeing none, we'll move on to our first item of business, which is a public hearing, continuation of a public hearing on the rezoning of A1 agriculture to R1 residential at the north end of Lakeshore Drive. And David, you're going to bring us up to speed on this.
Marty, I'm going to abstain on this topic too.
And note that Brian will be abstaining on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Holtz. At our last P&Z Commission meeting on August 22nd, we introduced this rezoning request from agricultural, A1 agricultural to R1 residential at the north end of Lakeshore Drive. It's a 20-acre parcel. They're indicated on the map. As we look at rezoning requests, we have to take a look at a few items, one being the land use of the future growth and development of the city, and this is identified as single-family, low-density development, which is, again, single-family detached development, roughly 1 to 4 units per acre. This area along First Street and Union Road is identified as future residential growth areas. So the proposal here from R1 is in accordance to that future land use map. Other elements we take a look at does it have access to public streets? Does it have adequate service, utility service nearby? And with this is, it's at the north end of Lakeshore Drive. There's sanitary sewer that runs from Lakeshore Drive into the property, then it heads east to a lift station. So the proposed development will utilize that existing sanitary sewer there. And then there's water main water that runs at the north end of Lakeshore Drive, so that will be extended into the proposed development. As this develops and everything to the west develops, we show a future sanitary sewer line that basically extends from the existing railroad line, which is just to the northeast corner of that, just off the picture there on the slide. But that will run up along the Cedar River and kind of run through Ulrich Park and then catch the north edge of this development heading west for that additional development. So with that, it satisfies the land use map, it satisfies the street access and utilities in this area. So we recommend approval of the zoning and forward this to City Council based on the recommendations and the technical requirements in the staff report, and then any comments or directions from the Commission. So this will basically identifies the rezoning of the land, and then the platting, which is more of the technical comments, and the construction and development of the land is the next item on the agenda. So,
yeah, thank you, David. Okay, at this time, I'd like to open it up to any public comment on this item. And just to kind of reiterate what David's talking about, we have 2 items that are related. The second item is the more detailed, actually part of platting this land. What we're talking about, the first item is basically just the rezoning request to rezone this from agricultural land to residential. So we want to contain our discussion on this part to the actual rezoning portion of it only, and then we'll talk about the rest of it in the next item. So anyone who would like to address the commission, I invite you to come forward and state your name and address.
My name is Tammy Stahl. I live at 1009 Lakeshore Drive, and when we purchased our property, we were told that the chances were slim to none that it could ever be rezoned because there were too many issues. And I just question how all those issues could be managed and taken care of just like that, so.
Okay. Anyone else who would like to make a comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion of this and open it up for the, well, first I'm going to ask a representative from the applicant if they'd like to make any comments on this rezoning request before we bring it back to the commission.
I'm Adam Daters with Clapsetta Garber Associates. I really don't have any specific comments at this point in time. I believe the rezoning request was summed up in the staff report given. You know, we believe it does meet all the criteria for rezoning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I'll bring it to the commission then for discussion and any action.
Seems pretty straightforward to me. We've plotted it out on our land use map, and
Seems consistent. I know there's some technical questions, which we'll get to the next one, but
Right.
the rezoning itself seems fairly straightforward.
Yeah, my comment would be, this is the lowest density of use we can have within our city other than agricultural, and it does fit with the land use map and all that, so it seems to make pretty good sense to me.
I would move that we approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We'll go ahead and vote. And we have all ayes and an abstention from Wingert and Holst as chair. Says Oberly, but I'm pretending to be Oberly tonight, so. So that motion carries, which brings us into a new business portion of our agenda tonight. And that one is the Park Ridge Estates preliminary plat. And David, you'll introduce that also.
Thank you. Again, this is the same development at the north end of Lakeshore Drive, 20.8 acre parcel for new Park Ridge Estates preliminary plat. With the preliminary plat, we kind of take a look at a number of elements and look at the actual characteristics of the property. So with this in mind, we have some sensitive features in this area along the north and east side. Approximately 9 acres of that is in the floodplain. There's significant tree stands in those areas and steep slopes. There are some meandering streams coming from the west and then the south, and that merges together there just north of the northeast corner of this site that empties into the Cedar River. So again, with the preliminary plat, we really kind of take a look at the whole development and those sensitive features. We want to look at how those features are maintained, those tree stands, wetlands, and those slopes. And then part of this review is we take a look at the grading of that area, make sure the stormwater detention meets all our requirements, collecting all that runoff. And what that is right now it's all uncontrolled runoff, and the design is to create a controlled runoff through that whole entire site, make sure it collects into those basins, design basins, and it's released at a approved rate into those streams at the north and the east side of the property. Moving along, this is the plat for the Park Ridge preliminary plat, and actually it's a roughly 300-foot extension of Lakeshore Drive, cul-de-sac there. The north arrow, the north side or facing north is on the right side of the screen. So basically the lots are identified there in the red, 6 residential lots, around 9.5 acres. There's an outlet which is at the top left corner of the screen there, but in reality it's located down the southwest corner of that site. So that's outside of lot 6. But then we have other sensitive areas, again, the floodplains, the wetlands, and steep slopes that run along the east and north, which is identified in outlots B through F, and that encompasses roughly 9 acres. So as part of the development, future development of the outlots, we want to make sure that those areas are kept in its natural state. So one tool that we've used in the past is a riparian easement that basically identifies this area as natural. We don't want any development in this area, no grading, no filling. There's some limited activities that could be, that may involve removing some invasive weeds or dead trees in those areas, but basically that area is kept in its natural state. So it is located outside of the lots. The idea is the plat would include the lots that are outside of the floodplain, and the remaining part would be conveyed to those adjacent property owners, but then covered in that riparian easement area. And so when we look at stormwater, and this is a key component to any preliminary plat, is we look at the routing, the grading, the runoff, how it's detained. It doesn't affect any surrounding properties. And the plan calls for 3 separate detention basins, which is identified in blue there. First one is kind of at the east side, adjacent to lots 1 and 2. The middle one is in between lots 3 and 4, and there's a little one in the corner of lot 6. But I want to kind of call your attention down in outlot B, which is down at the south end of the plat. You can kind of see some existing red lines there. There's an existing storm sewer pipe that runs from the north end of Lakeshore Drive existing. There's a manhole there, and it's tied into the storm sewers in the current Lakeshore Drive. So that routes the water up to that pipe and then runs it to the east into the ravine along there. And then the other arrow comes from the south, which is part of the Lakewood Hills Estates pond. So there's a structure on the south side of the dam that basically controls the water. The pond will get to a certain height, and then it just empties into a culvert and then runs under the dam there. So those 2 areas, it's kind of a sensitive area right now because there's some scouring and erosion down there that probably needs some attention and some little added protection through there. So that's something we got to take a look at as part of the construction plans and other documents when we move this along. So with that in mind, everything from basically the southern third of this plat kind of trickles down to the street, and then it enters into the storm sewer and then down to that pipe. Had a discussion with the developer and the engineer the other day about possibly getting that pipe away from the dam outlet and maybe moving it to the north side of outlot B to kind of create some separation so it doesn't really erode that any farther. So that's a design that they're going to take a look at. So the idea is to collect that runoff there in the southern third of that and then run it to the wetlands, which is not wetlands, the detention basin identified in those 2 outlots there behind 1 and 2. So then all that water will be graded, the land will be graded to divert into that structure, and then it will be released at the rate according to our ordinance, and then empty into the ravine there. Then finally, the remaining part of the subdivision will go into the detention there on lot 6, which is the northwest east corner of lot 6, run into a pipe and then empty into the basin at the end of the cul-de-sac. So this basin will collect that and then release it into the north ravine. So these basins should be identified on separate tracts or outlots. It's really for the benefit of the entire subdivision. So those maintenance and responsibilities and upkeep would be applied to the homeowners association instead of those individual lot owners. So those are things that are going to be tweaked on the preliminary plat, and then we have to enter into maintenance repair agreements and that sort of additional documents. So basically, we want to present this, have the discussion, and continue that at another planning and zoning commission meeting with those following stipulations of having those stormwater detentions on those separate lots. The lot widths must comply with the R1 district standards, and then create that riparian easement for those outlots along the floodplain that creates that natural area or maintains that natural area, and then conform to all the recommendation technical requirements. There's some tweaks in the deed of dedication we have to make. So again, with that zoning, we wanted to get this plat out in front of everybody so we can start the discussion for how we proceed with this.
Great, thank you, David. Yeah, so this item is for discussion tonight. There will be no vote taken. We will continue that on to probably the next commission meeting, I'm guessing. At this time, does the applicant or representative want to give us any other details or thoughts on this proposed plat?
Evening, Adam Baders with Clap Saddle Garber Associates again. As Mr. Sturch mentioned, we did meet earlier this week to discuss those comments, and I believe we are in agreement essentially with all the items presented. We will look at putting these detention ponds into tracks. The riparian easement was something we still want to see the details of that to make sure we were still comfortable with that, but in essence, we are in agreement with that as well. I believe the intent is to leave this area as really as natural as possible. That's part of the attraction of this development is all the wooded area, kind of the natural field of the subdivision. So, we are in agreement with hoping to conserve the existing landscape as much as possible.
So yeah, so you don't have any problems with the additional outlots or?
I think we can make that work.
Okay. One question that I had was there any consideration? I mean, part of the discussion in the staff report was on the how many lots you can have on a cul-de-sac, that type of thing. Was there any looking at having a potential for future extension of Lakeshore or a new road going to the west that would connect back into future neighborhoods going that direction that would maybe relieve some of that?
You mean continuing this road to the north?
Well, or having it would be between those two lots or something like that.
I don't think that was ever really on the part of the design intent for this development. I believe just keeping it to the amount of lots that we have shown was a key point in how we want to develop the subdivision.
Okay, just curious because it looks like there's a few hoops being jumped through to keep that within the requirements of the code.
Got one. Okay, go ahead.
One question, Adam. There's a lot of concern, obviously, about stormwater.
Mm-hmm.
There's a line of thinking at the end of the line here that it might be better to let the water into the creek without detaining it before you get this surge from the rest of the city. Has that been considered or discussed in any way?
I guess in my experience, that tends to be more of a pretty black and white policy issue with each jurisdiction. Either they do or don't let you do that. There's different, I guess, design philosophies with doing as such, with just free releasing it and getting it out of your subdivision as quickly as possible to make way for the rush of stormwater that's going to be coming down. But I believe in this case, we can still manage it. We can still release it at a very controlled rate that is significantly less than what the 100-year would be. So because the opportunity is there to provide that detention without too much difficulty with the design, I think we're more than happy to provide that.
Question I've got on that tract A, it's obviously the street. Today, at the end of Lakeshore Drive, there's kind of an elevation change as you go off of the roadway and then into the proposed development. Does the street elevation, is that going to come where if there's water in the road, is it going to be heading to the south, or are you going to have the street low enough that the water goes a different direction?
So what we're proposing right here is a low point, essentially right as you enter the subdivision from Lakeshore. There will be a low point there, and then approximately 50 feet away is a high point. So part of the street will be draining to the south, but it will be collected in a low point on this subdivision. So that'll be a collection point where if for any reason you did have a massive rain event that does need to relieve itself outside, the street, it would head south along this existing drainage way. But for the majority of it, I'd say probably between the lot line shared by Lot 1 and Outlot B, that does all fall to the north.
Okay. Well, the reason for the question, there's obviously people very close to the south, and if there's additional water coming from that direction, if there's any impact on to those people, it would be undesirable.
Well, we are putting intakes there, so I guess the intent is to capture it. We have in the past oversized intakes, to capture above and beyond what we would typically design with storm sewer. So we could look at that, and we can take another look into the profile of that street as well to see if we can, possibly push it a little bit further to the north instead of being so close there. I think we were also taking advantage of that existing storm. There's a storm manhole right there that's changing the angle of the storm sewer from the north to the east. We were kind of just locating it right on top of that to use the existing storm line that is outletting right now. But also, as Mr. Sturch mentioned, we are going to look at rerouting some of that storm sewer. So we can absolutely take that into account as we do that.
Okay, thank you.
One other question, Adam. Obviously, going back to the stormwater issue, there are concerns, the neighbors are going to talk about that, I'm sure. Are we comfortable are you comfortable that we're making the problem better and not worse through this development?
We are not increasing any amount of runoff onto the adjacent property. This entire site drains to the east and to the north, totally outside of the drainage limits of the actual lake property itself. So that's why I hesitated agreeing to using the word, making it better for them, because we currently don't impact it, much at all right now.
Right. Well, there's one resident I know to the north at the end of whatever, I think Skyline or whatever it is, that had seen high water and was concerned about that. But designing to such a standard that you're not increasing the runoff, and actually, I'm guessing it should improve a little bit to the flow rate. Yes.
That is what the addition of the detention ponds allows us to do. Is the city ordinance states that we have to take the 100-year developed flow and contain that, and then control the release to what the 5-year pre-developed flow is. So I know I'm getting into a lot of the specifics here, but we are taking a significant rain event and choking it down to a much smaller rain event.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions for Adam? Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to any public comment. If you'd like to come forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and any questions, concerns, et cetera, you may have.
Hello, I'm back again. Tammy Stahl, 1009 Lakeshore Drive. And I am here to address concerns I have involving the development. First, I want to say that I love our town. I'm so proud of our town, but we have not been treated well in our Lakeshore Association. And this is the time it needs to be addressed before anything further goes along. Not only do I feel like this development should not proceed any further till flaws are addressed, but any other development or building road or building until the water issue is addressed. We're being affected so severely by what's going on. I did call DNR today, and they're supposed to be coming and contacting people and dealing with this, but this is things, I'm sure you've looked at other developments as they've progressed in the same detail that you are in this one, and did not see the issues that we are facing, or I trust that you would have, not allowed them to happen or continue. But we are at the low point, and not all the water is going to go away from us. It's downhill. There's going to be runoff from the roofs, the shorter grass, the driveways, and from our research, the roads are they are the water flow. They're how the water is directed. So anyway, as I progress, just this last week, as you know, we had a huge water flow issue. This is the kind of debris that we get through our pond. There are tubes like this that come in that are so large that all of you together couldn't pick them up and carry them. And it's not just that it happens once in a while. It happens, when there's a decent water flow. So, and things have gotten so bad. Right now with this exact issue, you're trying to address the curb and gutter, those drains and how they're going in. What's happening is the water is coming in, and I don't know if you have the pictures to put up, but he said he was going to have pictures that he could put up. I assume that you see them, but I'm going to pass around some pictures to show. It's really hard to understand what's happening unless you see it yourself. Right now there are two, I'll pass this one on, two drains that come down, and they come out directed right at the dam. And when it rains a good amount, which it doesn't happen infrequently now, every year there's been at least one rain that comes out and it shoots into the side of our dam, and it even competes with the water going over top of the dam. So instead of the water just coming out, it pushes it back in, and it's totally washing out the whole dam. So this shows the curb and gutter, and that hopefully you're addressing right now. This one shows, I tried to make a circle around it, where the drain comes out and where...
Why don't you just give those to, and then back to the microphone, because otherwise people that aren't here tonight or are watching on TV can't hear.
You can hand those to us, though.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they're not in order, but this, I'll bring them all over then. This one, I have silver circles on. It shows where the drain comes out right now and where the dam is. And I've called the city to explain the issues that's come out, and even the erosion in this drain. And I've been told at one time they would come out and would fix like 10 feet around it, but they were waiting till it got drier out, and then the next year they refused to come out. So their word didn't matter at that time. So there's writing on the back of all those.
Thank you.
So. Then there's the ravine, which is in, I think, what you call the wetlands now, that comes out, and it's become huge and massive. And just since Monday, after the rains that happened, what was a huge hole became 8 feet deeper, 8 feet wider, and at least 10 feet longer into the property from so much water coming through. And it's really hard to imagine how volatile water can be until you experience and see the water come. And so this is not water just from the rain on our street, it's the water that's coming from all the streets, from First Street, from everywhere around. In addition to the deterioration from the ravine, which is fighting the water coming over the dam, and in the tube that it's meant to come over, and then the drain coming out, there is all the water coming down First Street, and all the debris that's coming with it, unintended. And in addition, then all the silt, most of it's sand. That sand is not just from the dirt, it's from building that's going on in the vicinity and washes out, and it's not being kept in its proper places like it should be. And the unintended consequences from that are, one, the pond is filling in far more rapidly than you would expect it to fill in some, but it's filling in far more rapid. Because it's filling in, it's killing our fish. All of our really large fish have died, and because then when it froze, it was shallow and it killed the fish. Then, because there weren't big fish there to keep the pond in a healthy state, then the algae would grow because it would get too warm and there weren't fish to eat the algae like it should. So then, if it rained even just a little, then that algae would go over the drain and fill the drain that's supposed to drain the water. So you had to be there all the time to pull the algae out, or else the water wouldn't go over. And so some unintended consequences are it's not safe to be out there in the middle of the night. And my husband even would try to go out there and keep it cleaned out because it's so unhealthy to have water going over it all the time. And he was sucked into the drain and had to be rescued out of the drain. So, and so we have tried to do our part by putting in bubblers, things like that, and that is somewhat taking some of the stuff out of the bottom, so it's healthier for the fish, so there are more fish, so they will eat it. But it's kind of a delicate thing, and so this whole thing needs to be addressed because now the dam it's just unhealthy, the pond is unhealthy, and the dam on the back side is totally damaged and washing out because of not being listened to in the past and all this time just letting it go. And so I just feel like it's time to address it all, and it sounds like somewhat that is the intention.
So as far as and I understand where you're coming from because I own one of those lots there for 10 or 12 years and spent a lot of time out there mowing grass and never building. And it's, it's a wonderful little pond and all that type of thing, but this development we're talking about here is basically north of that. And so I understand a lot of those issues with the pond, and it's not a good deal. You're getting, like you said, you're getting everybody's trash, getting all the silt coming in from elsewhere. As far as this development, I don't think what's being done here is proposed. I think will improve where that water outlets and things like that. That's the things we can control. The other parts are outside.
Well, and it's great.
This owner's request to develop the land. Those are things that are not pertinent to their development. So those are kind of outside the scope of what we're doing here tonight.
Well, there's going to be more runoff, and it is going to come downhill, and it will affect the area. And I appreciate working with us to try to come up, but I want to stress the importance of it and that it isn't just fixing problems for the future. There are already severe problems that have arose from the neglect of the past, and it all kind of comes together. And I think the DNR are concerned too about what's happened. Because when we had the big storm 10 years ago, there was not the deterioration like there has been since the developments of the properties on Union Road and all through there. There's been more water flow with that than there was during the big rains then.
Yep.
So.
Yep, we got a lot that feeds in from the other side of First Street into that area. Yeah.
And we as homeowners of the association don't feel it's right to have to take on the full burden of all that. So.
Yep.
And this is just an additional burden, thing, and the good time to address it.
I think what we're talking about in this particular request is getting those details all resolved so that there is no, when this land is developed, there is no additional burden that affects this,
make it
your
better for the future. I also want to invite every one of you to come out and be our guests to come in and take a look for yourselves, because it is hard to see it and understand it unless you see it with your own eyes, So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to address the commission, please come forward and state your name and address.
My name is Lisa Sage, and my husband and I own the lot that is on the corner of Lakeshore and Lilliput, and it's adjacent to Lot 6 in this division. I had a question for the developer. I was thinking I heard correctly that he said there would be no runoff to the south, but then in another sentence, he said something about some of it would run to the south. So I was concerned about, could we get that clarified of where is the water runoff going to be?
Can you clarify that for us, Adam? Is that?
So we had proposed a low point essentially directly north of where the current endpoint of Lakeshore Drive is. That was in part of the comments, part of the discussion was actually trying to get that low point moved further north to where I mean, right now as it is, Lakeshore falls to the north. So it creates a low point there regardless. What we will look at doing with another version of this is pushing a low point even further to the north to where there will not be any runoff from the street back to the south.
So then it would tend to gather a little farther to the north, and I'm assuming that it runs through Outlot B essentially?
It would. So through Outlot B, or we'll see how the grades work out.
Or across A, or excuse me,
Or between
one.
the shared lot line between Lot 1 and Lot B, possibly, pushing it to that point. As we design the profile of the street, obviously every change we make has an impact onto how we access those lots on the high and low.
So her lot is the one just right on the very...
Correct, right on the corner.
On the west corner, so it would be pushing the water slightly farther north than where it goes now is, I think, what Adam's saying. So a little bit farther away from your property.
Yes.
Because my understanding now is that the water,
The mic.
Get closer to the mic, yeah.
my understanding now is that obviously I don't live there full-time because we haven't built yet, but my understanding is that due to the elevation of the land, all the water comes running down the street currently. With the recent rain, the neighbors on Lilliput had said that the storm gutters were clogged, and so the water was waist deep in the street for part of the time. And I wondered if the development is going to be able to do enough grading to make the water run off. Like when I saw how the water was supposed to flow on Lot 6, to me, there's going to have to be a major restructuring of that elevation in order to make the water flow that way.
So the contours we show right now are existing contours, so we're not touching really the majority of Lot 6. It's going to continue to sheet easterly into what will be now the new road, and that new road would then take it further north to our low spot where we'd have storm sewer there, but we'd also have a low point there to where if we did have a rain event that would exceed the intake capacity, it would then overtop and then discharge between those two lot lines, between Outlot B and Lot 1.
But will grading be done how do you guarantee that it's going to go, or not guarantee, but how do you know that it's going to go to your drainage system and not onto my land?
I guess at that point, all we have to go on is the topography, is a topographic map that we have in hand. And with our map, it shows the contours in such a way that the runoff will sheet, essentially easterly into the new road.
And have you been out and walked the land yourself?
It's been a while, but I have been out there, yes.
Because that's what I would reiterate what was said before, is that I think every member of the commission has a duty to go out and look at the land, because on a map, I think it really looks very different than it does in person. And, I just don't envision how the elevation is going to be changed enough not to be coming down onto my land. And I'm just concerned that I'm going to have to build extra retaining walls or do more grading of my land when I am going to build. So I guess I'm concerned about how that's going to affect me.
So I'm pretty familiar with that area there.
What?
I said I'm pretty familiar with that area there, and it does mostly drain to the east. And so whatever's draining towards your land, they won't increase it. And that's part of the review process. We're going to make sure that whatever improvements they make to the land, that they're not changing the contour, so it's draining back onto your land. So
Right,
it's going the natural direction it goes now, or so you have that or less coming your
Because currently
direction.
it's coming down into the north, it'd be the northwest corner of my land is almost year-round wet in that corner.
That's the low spot there.
No, it's the high spot.
Oh, on the northwest, okay.
So the high spot is the wettest area of the lot that I own.
Yeah,
So that is concerning to me when you talk about how
yeah.
the lot that is up elevation, Lot 6 is still up elevation above me, and already, without a house there, there's already water that's coming down into the northwest corner of that, and so,
Well, whatever's draining from up there, I mean, that's, the house isn't going to be up there the way this is, mapped out.
do we have a map available that shows what size each of these lots are in acres?
They're big lots. I don't know if you can put that,
The lots range from 30,000 square feet to over 100,000 square feet.
Right, I saw that, but do you have it in acres anywhere that I could access?
We can get that for you.
yeah,
Yep.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Anyone else who would like to address the commission, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment and bring it back to the commission for any questions, discussion, thoughts. At this point, we're just giving our opinions and questions back to the staff so we can continue this on, most likely, I'm guessing, at the next meeting, is that's the intent?
The engineer and developer, we met yesterday, and they're going to make some tweaks to the plat, and again, calling out those detention areas and the tracks, and then we can take another look at those drainage patterns there down at the south end of that site.
Yeah. I guess the other thing was I found interesting that all these new developments will be required to have a sprinkler system in them in order to.
That's the exception for that secondary access. So every one of these lots, every one of these houses has to have that fire suppression sprinkler system in the buildings. It's part of the fire code.
I would highly recommend that you walk the property, that maybe city engineering or whatever, walk the property. And this is why I just developed 2 lots, and whatever the engineers said we had to do, we did, and it's not really working either. And I know we had a lot of rain, but there's nothing better than actually walking out there and seeing what's going on as far as where this water's going to go and whatever. It sounds good on a map, and you look at the elevations and whatever, but actually walking out there and seeing it sometimes tells you a little different story. So I would highly recommend that city staff do that.
I was out there the other day, and the pictures that they show, you can't get a good handle on them until you actually see the ends of those intakes and outlets, and then some areas is eroding. So again, if we look at redoing that storm sewer to the north side of that outlot B, there's potential maybe to clean up some of that area and get it away from the dam outlet.
Sure.
Right, so they try to reduce that erosion that occurs where the two
Right now they're pretty close together. They're kind of merging together.
So bring that farther north so that.
In addition, Tammy Stahl again, Lakeshore Drive, in addition to coming, I would also invite you to let myself or another surrounding owner know that you were coming so that we could help point out things that we think would be of interest to you.
Thanks, Sam. Any other questions or comments from the commission?
I mean, as I look at it, there's a couple issues. I mean, one, there's a whole bunch of existing problems. And then does this development make them any better or worse? And in our case, our evaluation doesn't make it any worse than it is. I guess I would encourage the developer to look at if there are easy ways to make it better as part of this development. Let's look at them. We certainly don't. It's not your obligation to do that, but sometimes if there's a win-win, let's try and achieve that.
Yeah, if they can make some upgrades at that, you're talking right there at the end of at the end of Lakeshore, where that existing intakes and storm sewer, that's the kind of the critical point where the two touch. If you can do some oversizing, like you mentioned, possibly, and things like that, I think that would be beneficial and be a good gesture for the neighbors.
I think it was verification of that the water that was coming off of that tract, or Lot 6, and the direction the water flow's going. I know we had some old drawings there and some arrows and stuff, but maybe there's some contour maps that might be more appropriate that would show that water routing. Make sure that, again, we're looking at the right context there.
I took that plat and tried to clean it up a little bit as we showed on here, because it can, it's attached to your staff report, but we can look at that too.
All right. I'm sure it's complicated.
Anything else for the commission? So we will have this back on the agenda on our next meeting on September 26th, and anticipate taking some action on it at that time. So,
If we have this on the agenda, we'll send the notice out a week ahead of time.
okay.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
folks should be aware of that, and
Yep.
keep
Want to
your
make
eye
sure they
open.
cover all these items, so next meeting or the meeting in October.
So
We really
depend-
can't move this along to council until the rezoning is done up to the third reading, so that pushes it in November. So we've got time to make some adjustments and get this.
So we may, depending on how the progress goes on these updates and things, it may or may not be ready for the next meeting. So people need to just be aware of that.
If it is on, we will send out notice.
Okay. All right. Thank you, David. And thank you, everybody, for coming and all your comments. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we will move on now to our next item, which is the downtown design review of 308 Franklin Street. And David, you're up again.
Yeah, this item was basically put on the agenda based, from the city standpoint, because this property here at 308 Franklin Street is in a commercial zoning district. It's in the downtown overlay, and we're actually working with the property owner to relocate their business from West First Street. Their existing business is tenanted for a total acquisition as part of that reconstruction project. So the owner did find this new location to serve their commercial business. It's a commercial office, pretty low-key commercial business. So the idea is they want to build this addition off the back. Roughly, it's a 28 by 11 foot addition with a deck off the back of that house, in between the garage and in the back of the house, to accommodate the ADA accessibility requirements. The existing bathroom in there is pretty small, so part of the addition includes the bathroom and a new stairway down to the basement. That stairway ties into an existing cellar door there, just below that window there on that picture. So the addition is going to extend off that with a new deck, and they're going to put a new ADA lift unit there off the decks to provide that access into the new commercial business. So again, it's a facade review. It's kind of just an extension. They're going to remove that existing small addition, which is a shed roof, kind of build this new, tied into the existing roof there. Materials match the building, same style of lab board siding. So we want to move that along and recommend approval of this site plan.
Thank you, David. Is the applicant here and would like to address the commission? Don't see that. Is there, I'd open it up to the public. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. I would just make one comment. It looked like that addition is slightly different, lower roof pitch than the rest of the building. I think it would be nice if it was the same pitch. But other than that, it looks fine to me. Comments, questions from the commission, a motion?
I'd say motion to approve.
It's been
The,
moved and seconded.
with the idea of changing the pitch of that roof.
Okay, it's been moved to approve with a change of the pitch of the roof. It's been seconded. Is your second still good, Brent?
Still good.
Still good. Is there any further discussion? Let's go ahead and vote then. And that passes with all ayes when the chair abstaining. All right, our next item of business is the downtown design review for 419 Washington Street. And Iris, you are introducing this item.
Yes, thank you. So the owner of Cotton in 419 Washington Street is proposing to build a new deck in the front of his property, really with the purpose of providing more seating for his I guess, customers, as well as providing more visibility for his restaurant. So the property is located in the Central Business District overlay, and which requires really site plan and design review for any substantial improvement to a property. So the proposed new deck addition to the front of this property does fall within those requirements. So that's why it's in front of us here today for both the site plan review and design review. So this property is very unique when it comes to our downtown overlay. It is actually originally built as a single-family home in the 1920s and was converted to a commercial use in the 1990s. Cottonwood Canyon first opened its doors in December of 2016. So that existing ramp that you see along the front and side of the building was put in place to meet the commercial ADA accessibility requirements, and that was done again in the 1990s. The property is located in the C3 commercial district, so the use of a restaurant is consistent with that zoning, so it is a good, valid use for that area. And then just aside, this proposal also includes moving the sign, the freestanding sign that's currently in front of the building to the other side of the walkway, just to make room for that addition of the deck. So it meets all the sign requirements, just moving it to a different location. So that will be also part of this discussion. So here are some images showing what is being proposed. And again, the goal is to add vibrancy to the area, and really that does follow our overlays vision as well. So it is something that would be, staff feels, a good addition to the property as well as to the area. As the proposal is an addition to a repurposed single-family home, and it is actually located between two residential buildings. It does make this a unique case when it comes to design. So our current overlay guidelines really are more focused towards as-built commercial buildings. So it does make this unique. So keep that in mind when we discuss the design of it. And really, the proposed additional outdoor service area needs to really respect and complement the existing structure as well as the residential properties next to it. So in a typical residential fashion, the building itself, Cottonwood Canyon, is set back further from the sidewalk, just like you'd see a front yard for a single-family home, and it is elevated a few feet above the sidewalk as well. The proposed deck is 13 feet long by 22.5 feet wide, and it is proposed to extend all the way to the property line. As the deck will be elevated several feet above the sidewalk, staff has been working with the applicant to address some concerns we had with that, mainly in the sense of how that deck would interact with the sidewalk and the people walking by. So we've actually come to an agreement, and we both feel it's a better plan, both in terms of aesthetics as well as keeping that character alive there. But moving the deck basically 3 feet further back, so back from the sidewalk 3 feet, and having a plant buffer there to kind of help with that residential feel and have that the decking not be so direct against where people are walking, so to make that feel more engaging, attractive from a pedestrian perspective. And then just a side note, the building department has looked at the proposed work, and the proposed additional seating area does follow the building guidelines and codes for carrying capacity. So those aspects in terms of bathroom sizes and such have been looked at as well, and this does meet those requirements. So when looking at design review, there are a number of areas that the overlay district calls for, here listed on the slide. Really the three, or really four, that matter in this case are proportion, materials and texture, color, and architectural features. So I'll really hone on those issues and quickly give a quick summary. The staff report does go into more detail in these four areas as well. So we touched a little bit on proportion already in terms of the setback, trying to make it feel a little bit more residential in that sense, having a little bit of green space there. And then additional details, we also looked at, residential porches and decks usually don't come out that far. They don't have that feel. So we do address that a little bit in our staff report. And again, trying to find a way to mediate that. And it is a unique use being commercial. So that is something that we're working with the applicant on to make work for this site. So in terms of materials and texture, the applicant is proposing to use wood for his deck expansion. And although wood decking is not an acceptable material for the frontage of a commercial building, it is consistent for a residential stoop and porches. And given that this is a repurposed residential building and surrounded by other residential uses, staff feels that the use of a wood, or using wood as the decking material would be appropriate as long as it is designed to complement both the existing house as well as the residences around it. In terms of color, the standards of the overlay state that any wood used on a facade must be painted. And as this is a deck, staff is open to allowing opaquely stained wood to give that illusion of paint. The applicant, we discussed this with the applicant, he's open to it, and he's proposing to do a cinnamon color of a brown, and I think it'll look really nice with the colors of the existing building. And so it'll also help in terms of the maintenance of the deck, as it'll help waterproof it and keep it looking sharp. The last item, architectural features. The deck itself was visually designed to be an extension of the existing ramp. And really what we're looking for is we're trying in the best sense, again, to kind of complement the existing structures while the residences around it. So ideally it should best represent a porch in that sense. Visually should kind of have that residential feel. So there were two concerns, or really not concerns, but suggestions or thoughts that staff had in this regard that we talked to the applicant about, and he's willing to make these changes. And the first one was that you'll notice that in the drawing that's proposed, the posts are exposed, and so there's an open space under the deck that would become a maintenance issue in terms of weeding. It could become unsightly, and also a great place for trash to collect over time. So, and also following standard, really best porch practices, installing a skirt, so a solid kind of visual block of that would help both visually and in terms of maintenance keep that area looking and functioning well. So he has agreed to do that. The second thought that we had really, again, was making sure that porch aesthetic was met. So the details of that design, the balustrade, I learned that word this week, of that area. We would want more details on that. So actually, right before this meeting, I was handed a picture, so I didn't have time to put in the slideshow, so I apologize for that. But he did provide these details on how it would look. So the idea is that there would be an opening, underneath it, so to push snow under, and again, kind of best, again, meeting that porch look. So this is something that I think would go really well in that area. So he's willing to do that and has provided those details. So with that, in summary and in conclusion, city staff is recommending approval of the proposed amendments and to the site, including the sign relocation to the other side of the walkway, with the stipulations that the wood deck and existing wood ramp be painted, which we discussed and the applicant is willing to do, that the applicant modifies the deck to include that 3-foot setback so that we have that buffer there, and then also the details are provided, so we do have that moving forward. And the applicant is here today if you have any questions, and I'm also happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Iris. Does the applicant or a representative want to add anything to the staff report? Come forward and state your name and address.
Randolph Bryan, owner of Cottonwood Canyon. I think Iris did a pretty good job of explaining. I'm pretty comfortable working with any adjustment that needed to be done to that porch. I think it will enhance what we're doing on Washington Street. I don't really see any problem unless you have any question for me.
Any questions for Randolph?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission on this item? If so, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll come back to the commission for discussion and a motion.
Were the neighbors notified and no opposition, I take it? No one's here?
Community Main Street was notified, as we do with our general downtown notifications, but we didn't reach out to the neighbors specifically, no.
So the two neighbors immediately to either side, are either one of them, do we know for sure if they're aware of this or not?
We are not, no.
Okay.
So I guess, yes.
Yeah, please.
Neighbors, the gentleman who owned the property, owned both properties side by side. I did reach out to them because it's a mixed use. They're both rental property. He didn't have a problem with that, so I think it's on a personal level. We talked about it, so
Okay.
he didn't have any problem.
You didn't get any negative feedback from either owner. Okay.
Actually, he likes the idea. He liked the idea of me being there.
Okay.
And that's what he's doing on both sides. So.
All right. All right. Thank you.
So I have a question, and that is, those are rental properties or houses, residences. Would they be allowed to put decks like that if requested? I'm just curious, is this just a commercial thing, or is it?
So residential and commercial buildings have different building requirements. So
Okay.
deck for a residential use would be seen differently. So they would not be able to go all the way forward as he did. That said, we are making those changes to the design that's going through, so they could go up to 10 feet to the sidewalks. They still have that front yard feel, so it would be treated differently.
All right, thank you. I've moved to approve.
A motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. And we have all ayes and with the chair abstaining. So that motion carries. Our final, getting close to the end. Our next item is the downtown design review for 408 to 412 Main Street. And Iris, you're introducing this one also.
Yes, thank you. So the owners of 408, 412 Main Street are proposing to paint a mural over the entire south side of their building. This property is also located in the central business district, so it does trigger those substantial improvement requirements. So that's why we have it here today for our design review. The proposed mural will cover the building's entire 840 square foot south-facing facade, which is currently adjacent to a parking lot. Although the proposal will not affect the primary facade of the building and is not along Main Street, it is highly visible as you enter Main Street from the south. I have a visual here for you. As you drive in north, as you can imagine, you drive past the library and then you pass the depot, and there's the building right there to your right. So again, highly visible as you move in. That said, it will bring visual interest to that area and vibrancy to a wall that is currently blank and really uninteresting. The wall itself is already painted, so painting over it will not destroy or really remove any significant brickwork that we would look to be preserving. So that's not a concern that we need to deal with this review. So here's an image of the proposed mural that was designed by our own local Jenny Bavers. Sorry, probably butchered that again. I asked her earlier to pronounce it. But it is her abstract representation of Cedar Falls, and there are numerous local landmarks and symbols incorporated into it. There are numerous colors that are proposed within this mural, which provide contrast and vibrancy in the design. Staff feels that it is appropriate on a secondary facade and at this location, and we feel that there's enough neutral colors really to stabilize the piece. If approved, the mural will be painted by attendees at a artistic weekend retreat that they'll be hosting downtown, and later completed by stakeholders in the downtown. The applicants have agreed to take responsibility for maintaining the mural, which would include addressing any graffiti or any vandalization or maintenance over time to that. With that, staff recommends that the mural be moved forward with the recommendation of approval to City Council with any recommendation or suggestions from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then, of course, that the owners take responsibility for maintaining the mural and keeping it up to spunk. The artist is here, I believe, as well as the owner and I think Carol Lilly as well from Community Main Street, if you have any questions.
And would the owner care to add any comments?
No comment.
Okay. Did Community Main Street weigh in on this
They did, yes.
in the affirmative?
The affirmative, yes.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the commission on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
I think it's exciting, and I'm excited to see it get done, so I'm positive. I'd like to see more of this in our alleys.
I like it too. My only question is, does this open us up, is this being accepted because it's a secondary facade more than a primary? I'd hate to have precedent set and then somebody want to do this to a primary facade and then
Yes, so if it were a primary facade, a lot more scrutiny would be taken, and generally murals are not allowed on primary facades. So yes, because it's secondary, that's why it works.
Okay.
And the fact that the brick's already painted, that also is a huge benefit in this case.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a neat idea, but art's very subjective, and it's really the first time we've had a mural presented since I've been on P&Z.
Yeah, it is.
So it just kind of seems strange for us to approve it. How is art, the sculptures and stuff downtown, who handles and appropriates the art that's placed downtown currently for the city?
The Public Art Commission works with, I think it's you and I, to rotate the sculptures throughout. Carol Lilly, I think, can probably provide more details on that. But since those are in the right-of-way, it's just generally they work with our maintenance department to kind of switch those out. So they review it, but they've never come through this commission, I don't think, because it's not part of the private side.
It just is different for us to be approving art, I guess, for display down there.
Come forward, Carol, and
I think the difference with this project is there's no public funds being used. So the Public Art Commission and Public Art Committee, when public funds are being used, it goes through that channel, through the cultural side. And this is it's a private property, private payment and all of that. So that's my understanding of the difference of why it's coming through this route as opposed to the public art side.
Okay.
Does that help?
thank you, Carol.
I guess the only comment I got, it looks like it's an appropriate part of a building to paint over since it's already painted. Now, I guess one of the things, if somebody wanted to come through with a request like this and it was on some of our really nice downtown brick, what would the rules be on something like that if it was to come against some other side of a building that, looks like something we'd want to preserve?
Yeah, sure. So the way it's written in the code now, it says it's highly discouraged. So I think there's certain cases where, you have, let's say, you have unpainted stone, but it's not necessarily that nice brick looking. It's a stone that it won't take away anything by painting over it. So that's why we wanted to leave a little bit of flexibility there. But generally the nice brick, actually good, you want to preserve those stone details. The language in there is highly discouraged. So that would be something that we would catch at the P&Z time, that we
All right,
would
that's
be encouraging those types of.
That makes things a little different, sure. Okay, all right.
Carol, you want to add one more item?
Can't answer that one.
Thank you.
From our standpoint, one of the differences would be too is there are other techniques that you can use on unpainted brick. I was just in Ottumwa doing a site visit, and they have murals on unpainted brick, but it's not actually on the brick. They do panels, and then they attach the panel to the brick, so it maintains that brick. So that would be something we would encourage. We would encourage the mural still and the vibrancy and that type of thing with the art.
I see.
And there's ways that you can do that without actually painting the brick as well. So
Okay.
that would be the difference, or how we would approach suggesting that they handle that.
Right, and the language highly discouraged is good. Okay.
My feedback is I think conceptually it's good. I'm a little, like Dave, I'm a little uncomfortable this group approving art, what it is. And I think at least a cursory review with the art committee seems appropriate. So I'm a little uncomfortable approving it without that, personally.
So really, in terms of our P&Z review, really what we're commenting on is, location, is it good? Painting over this material, this wall, is it good? Another comment could be, are the colors appropriate? You're not commenting on the content of the painting itself, but let's say they were all black and white. Maybe we want that, maybe we don't. I mean, that would be something we can ask questions about, but you're right, in terms of content, there is a lot of subjectivity, and yeah, so it's really more kind of the objective parts of the review that this commission looks at. And we also check to make sure that there's no advertising in the murals, because then it becomes a sign, and then signs have different regulations. So that's when we look at the actual design of it. So those are the different aspects we would look at as a commission, not necessarily the content of the abstraction itself.
So my comment is no one is looking at the content and making sure that it's...
Well, staff looks at the content, and then basically, based on what we see, and then, feedback as well from Community Main Street, we determine whether it's a mural or a sign, and that the content itself also is, taken under consideration. So, sometimes certain content may not be appropriate for certain areas, but that would be a discussion for later. But the language in our mural code is pretty open right now. It's not. There's a lot of room for interpretation, so that might be something.
There's no public, or no comment then from the Public Art Commission then on this item then?
No, they have not. I don't know if they've seen this piece or not, but I don't think they have, no. Okay. But they're not required to look at it unless it's public funds.
Understood they're not required, but just...
We could do that in the future, for sure, if that makes you feel more.
We're working really hard to bring art downtown. I think it's important and it's a good project. I just think we've got a group looking at that. It seems appropriate to me to, even if it's not required, to
at least get their comment, maybe?
Yeah.
This is a privately owned building too, so I think we need to consider that. I like the public art process and all of that, but this is a privately owned building. I agree that we have, staff has looked at it and has recommended approval based on a couple things. You're going to get 1,000 different opinions. Some are going to like it, some aren't going to like it, and
That's right.
Well, I guess that's my objection with it. I personally like it myself and like having a mural there, but it's kind of a slippery slope if we approve that piece of art, that someone else brings another piece of art and it's on a building, versus something that's approved to the Art Commission that goes in the public right away.
More discussion? Anybody up for a motion?
I would move to approve.
Have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote then. So we have 4 ayes and 2 nays with 1 abstention, so the motion carries. So that brings us to our last item of business today, which is commission updates, future community visioning process and zoning code update for downtown Cedar Falls. And Karen, you're going to fill us in on that once you have a chance to get your notes done.
Get my notes done on the vote here, sir. Yeah, so I gave a presentation at the City Council a few weeks ago. I think there's been a lot of discussion about updating the city zoning ordinance and how we go about that and what the process is for that. Back a few months ago, I gave a presentation to the commission about different types of zoning, and we focused in a little bit on form-based codes and how those are different and how those might be useful in Cedar Falls. And then the City Council at 2 different work sessions, separate work sessions. The first session they talked about zoning in general and the need for updating the zoning for the entire city and what the options were for that. And there was quite a bit of discussion at that work session about what the approach should be, and there were a lot of questions about what is form-based zoning. And so we did a second work session where I gave a similar presentation to the council that I gave to P&Z and had a discussion with the council about form-based zoning. At the recent council committee meeting, discussed it for a third time, and the council directed staff to move forward with an RFP to focus on the downtown area first as sort of a first effort to update the zoning, because there's been a lot of development pressure in the downtown, and it was a good place to start with zoning code update. And they're interested in doing a form-based code. Downtown would lend itself well to that type of zoning. So they directed staff to move forward. We're going to be developing an RFP for consultant services to attract a consultant that's experienced in visioning for downtown and development of a form-based zoning code. So we're hoping to have that out by the end of September, and then the approval of the contract for consultant services sometime in December or January. The City Council also wanted to do a goal setting themselves to just give overarching broad goals for what the visioning process would be about. So we're hoping to do that in February. And then the big process of public outreach for the whole community would happen after that. So it takes several months, and one process that's often used for form-based codes to create a vision plan is to do a design charrette, and I'll describe what that process is in just a moment. But I think there's a lot of opportunities, and the idea is to get broad public input for a vision for downtown. So once that vision, and there's a lot of buy-in from a lot of different constituencies and stakeholders in the downtown and for the whole community, really, because downtown is, a very beloved place in the community. So it's good to get a lot of public input on what that vision should be for downtown. Once that vision is established then and adopted by and run through this commission and the City Council, that vision then will be translated. Then the next step of the process would be to develop a code that would implement that vision. And then, of course, the code would go through that same sort of public outreach and public legislative process that all code amendments would go through. So then the final adoption of the new code, we would hope the timeline would be about February of 2020. And if that process goes well and we're happy with that process, at some point we could probably start a next area for visioning, so we can keep that process going. I think there's some concern about wanting to update other parts of the zoning for other parts of the city. One of the places mentioned a number of times is College Hill as being the next area to focus on, but other ideas came up forward too about University Avenue and doing some sort of corridor planning and some code for that area as well. Also, because there's been a lot of discussion about parking and how that plays into development downtown, the city, I just wanted to update you on that. We're in the process of interviewing for parking consultants. We sent out an RFP for that, and we'll be deciding on that pretty soon and forwarding a recommendation to council. So we'll get that parking study started. It should be completed by the end of December. So we'll have that information from the parking study to be able to feed into the future visioning and code development for the downtown. So just a little bit about design charrette and what that means. It's a type of public input technique to use to gather a lot of public input from a lot of different stakeholders in a very short period of time. It's kind of an exciting process. You bring in a design team from the consultant, work for 4 or 5 days straight, set them up in maybe the community center or somewhere in City Hall. That allows them to, the public to come in and see what's happening with the design process, provide their input. There could be specific stakeholder meetings, interviews. And then the idea is that design evolves over that 5 days so that the public and everybody can see how that vision is taking shape. And so by the end of that 5-day charrette process, we have a finished product it's a draft master plan that has had a lot of public input, and people can see how it evolves over those few days. So that may be one of the techniques that is used for that visioning process. And then the development of the code itself, I don't think I need to belabor that. I think we discussed it at your meeting several months ago about what's involved with the form-based code, and that basically is the regulations. It would supplant the existing zoning in the downtown area. The regulating plan of a form-based code would be similar to a zoning map.
So Karen, I mean, basically what we'd be talking about doing is just kind of chunking off that piece of the city, and it's almost a standalone code zoning, because it's quite a bit different than the rest of the existing code.
Right, and that's part of the development of the code, is how you integrate that legally into the existing structure of the city's code, and certainly there's ways to do that. Right now, there's an overlay downtown, and there's an overlay in College Hill and several other places in the community as well. So rather than have it be an overlay, this would be new zoning for the downtown that would supplant the overlay and the existing zoning designations in that area. So that would all be part of that process, is not only coming up with a code, but then you'd have to rezone the property to that new designation, those new designations, so that those properties would be then regulated by the new code.
Regulated by this, okay, sure. Very good.
So, any questions about that process?
It's exciting. Let's get going.
Yeah, that's great. I applaud the council for looking at that. One question I have is that, it takes a while to go through this process, and we're doing a small chunk of the city. Are there some kind of broad planning moves, maybe that aren't quite as in terms of looking at zoning, but some broad plannings move for the entire kind of city that might be considered that aren't quite all that detailed? Maybe it's not a zoning review, but part of that planning process that, if we wait to 2020 for this part of the city,
for the rest of the
time for the rest of the city,
yeah.
right? And can there be some high-level kind of analysis and planning done for some of the other parts of the city without maybe the rezoning kind of component to it?
Right. Yeah, and I think we would continue to address some of those things that come up but that we need to address and of course it's all a matter of staff time and priorities and what's the priority at the time. So we're trying to be careful of that process and make sure we're doing it right, but at the same time, if there are code amendments need to happen in the interim, or things come up that we need to, it's not like we're stopping the rest of the work that we're doing in the rest of the city.
Well, thanks, Karen. Do we have some new reading materials too? Is that something you want to comment on, or?
Well, I'm happy to provide new reading materials if you wish, but let me know if you want any. Oh, right.
The books.
Right. I didn't.
The books.
Did you hand those out, David?
Mandy did.
Mandy. Okay. Yes, the mayor. Those are from the mayor, and it's just a book. It's a brief book about smart growth principles.
So this is on the mayor's reading list.
It's on the mayor's reading list.
Okay.
And,
Will there be a test?
Meeting.
yeah. So.
When he comes to reappoint, he may be asking you about this.
Some of the authors are pretty well-known urbanists, have been around for decades, and so they've written a lot of different materials. I'm not familiar with this particular one, but you'll recognize some of those names. If you Google any of them, you would be able to find different things that they'd done or talked about. So pretty accepted principles, but it's kind of interesting to read about those.
I have read the book, and there are a couple things in it that they talk about building a transit region, transportation choice. They're showing a lot of buses, streetcars, trolleys. So is that something we're going to be talking about for form-based downtown Cedar Falls? Going back to the Cedar Falls streetcar? That we had one of those years ago. Well, I'm just curious because these are the principles in the book, you know.
So I think the book was written, of course, for a broad audience in different cities of different sizes, and of course, everything is all about context, right? And so you calibrate everything for your community based on the size of your community. So obviously, a city of Cedar Falls size is not going to have, commuter trains and that sort of thing. But the idea that there are alternative transportation modes, that people are, riding bikes and walking, and we can all those kinds of things that happen in Cedar Falls, and and there's a bus service. So, to the extent that those can be thought about when you're doing your planning, I think it's a good idea.
All right. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Appreciate the update.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify with aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you.